My name is Harold Fritzler. I was with the 491st Bomb Group in the 852nd Bomb Squadron, and I was a navigator.
How old were you when you joined, and where were you living at the time?
When I joined, I was 20 years old, and I was living in Portland, Oregon.
Why did you join the service?
The draft was getting close to me, and I decided I wanted to make my choice rather than be sent wherever they wanted to send me. And I decided I wanted to go into the Air Corps.
Tell us about your arrival in England.
Arrival in England, we flew the North Atlantic route, and we could not land in England. We landed in Ireland, Northern Ireland, at Nuts Corner, at Air Base there. And from there we boarded a ship in Belfast to Liverpool, and if I recall correctly, it was what we called a banana boat. And we came in completely blacked out into Liverpool, and from there we went to Stone, England, which was the redeployment center for Air Force. And do you want me to go on with that?
When you went across the Atlantic, were you in a plane?
Across the Atlantic? We flew. Yes, we flew from Grenier Field, New Hampshire, to Goose Bay, Labrador, across Greenland to Iceland, and then from there down to Ireland.
Were you worried being the navigator?
I was the navigator.
Were you worried?
Worried? Considerably worried, because I had cloud cover. We were flying between cloud cover over Greenland. Could see nothing either up or down, but white out. And I was a little worried there, because I had nothing to check except my DR wind that was given to me at briefing. And I had only one checkpoint, which was the radio station on Greenland. And I waited for the cone of silence, and we went right over the station. So I knew exactly where we were, and I went from there. And we came in right over the base on Iceland.
How about the trip from Iceland to England?
The trip to Iceland from England, that was very interesting. I navigated that down there, gave the pilot the heading. We were flying down there. We had the radio compass tuned in on Stornoway, Scotland, and kept my eye on the radio compass, and all of a sudden I looked at the compass, and it turned 90 degrees, pointing directly into Norway. And I called the pilot, and I says, look what's happening. The Germans are trying to get us to go to Norway. You follow my heading and forget about the radio compass, and that's what happened.
When you were on your base for the first time, how long did it take to get ready for your first mission, and what did you do?
We did practice missions, and mainly practice missions, really, and had some briefings and things like that while we were on the base.
What do you remember about your first mission?
First mission? The first mission was to Misberg, Germany, which is right outside of Hanover. Sometimes they said it was Hanover instead of Misberg, but we didn't know what to expect. We were almost to the point where we thought we were watching a movie. And then all of a sudden dawns on you, no, this is not a movie, this is the real thing. Especially when the plane beside us was shot down. The plane beside us took a hit in the right wing. He came on a collision course right at us. The pilot got control and got it back out where proper place and formation, and the wing broke off, and the plane exploded. And of course, one of the duties that I had was count parachutes, which I did, and wrote that all down. And it didn't dawn on us too much, but what was really happening, it was, like I said, it seemed like a movie, something you was seeing in the theater. When you got back and you got to really thinking about it, it was the real thing. And that was our first mission. We had, I think we had about 12 flak holes in it. The plane ahead of us took a hit in the, between the rudders, and it blew the fabric off of, most of the fabric off the rudders and one elevator, which came floating back past our plane.
What other casualties happened on that raid?
I'm not aware of any other casualties for that raid, but that I know of.
Tell us about your next most memorable experience as you were completing your raids.
The next experience was the resupply mission, and I'll have to start from the time we flew the practice mission. They gave us a practice mission, and we were resupplying the paratroopers that were dropped in Holland to take the bridge at Eindhoven. In the practice mission, we flew at 50 feet over England, and then we flew the real mission, and they didn't fly it at 50 feet, they flew it at about 200 feet and dropped all these supplies, and as far as I know, we dropped supplies in the proper areas. I was riding the nose turret, and this was my only occasion to attack an enemy direct with the machine guns. We flew over the Eindhoven bridge, and as we were approaching it, I saw a sentry on the bridge, and I was tracking him with my sight, but I could not identify whether he was friend or foe, and I knew we were to take that bridge, so I did not shoot. But that individual, whoever it was, owes his life to me, because I could have easily wiped him out.
What was it like to navigate on that particular raid?
Navigation wasn't very much there, because we were down so low. We were taking small arms fire. Of course, we were in formation, and we followed the lead. We were not a lead. Navigator's job on those situations was to follow and make sure you knew where you were at all times, in case you had to go back on your own. But in this case, we stayed right in formation. We did on the return, since we had our hydraulic system shot out, we did fly back to Woodbridge, which was a long runway that was inclined for people with no brakes. And we landed there, and on landing, we broke the nose wheel, and the nose scraping on the runway set the plane on fire. I went out the top hatch, dove off of the nose of the plane to the runway, and as I was diving off of the nose, the 50 caliber rounds that were ammunition that wasn't expended were cooking off, I guess you call it, from the heat, and the bullets were whizzing all through the air in all directions, and I could hear this going on. So I hit the deck and rolled over beside the runway and watched the plane burn. All of our crew got out of that aircraft, and it was destroyed right there on the runway. My regular crew that I trained with, they came also at Woodbridge over the top of the field, and they saw us burning, and the pilot had to fly around until they could make room for him to land, and he landed, and his left landing gear collapsed, and the prop came off. It's probably #1 engine, and flew through the air and came down and chopped into the nose of the aircraft in front of his feet. And so both of us that night went back to North Pickenham by truck.
What happened after you get back to Pickenham? How soon did they get you up in the air again?
Not very long, just a few days. As soon as our turn came up, we were back in the air.
Tell us about your next most memorable experience as you were doing those raids.
The next most memorable experience was the crash, which we were taking off on a mission. It was on January 5th, 1945. That morning, it was a cold morning. It was snowing. We were out on the, lined up to take off, go down by the runway, in the runway. The first plane off was the forming ship. It took off, and they got airborne, and they crashed, and everyone was killed. We were second plane off. The last I remember before we took off, it was snowing hard. The engineer was sweeping off the wings, the snow off the wings. We had a full load of bombs, full load of gas, and we started down the runway, and it was not flying very well because we were taking off with the tail skid scraping the runway. I was directed by the engineer, which was standard procedure. He had a load adjuster, and he'd say, you take off in the waist, or you take off here or there, to kind of adjust the load by whatever the bomb load was and so forth. And so I was sitting back in the waist, facing the back, right back of the bomb bay by the small window on the right-hand side of the aircraft. Of course, I was facing back, so I was looking out to the left. And the bombardier sat in front of me, down further. And as we took off, we probably were 75 feet in the air, and the right wing went vertical to the ground, and I knew we were going to crash. There was a supernatural presence right beside me that put its hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, you're going to be all right." The next thing I know, I'm out in this field where they'd torn the bottom of the airplane off, and I'm out in this field rolling over and over in the plowed field in the snow. And as a navigator, we always got the time of takeoff, and I had the flashlight in my hand, was looking at my watch at the time, and I still had this flashlight in my hand. And to my knowledge, I was never knocked out or anything. I just rolled over, and I don't know how many times. And of course, when I stopped rolling, I got up and looked to see where the plane was because I expected it to blow up. But it did not. There was a fire burning in number one engine, which happened to be an oil fire. And it went out. I do recall that there was another plane right behind us that took off, and it was also having trouble, but it did get airborne, and I thought they were going to run into us. But they did get airborne, and since then it's been the discussion whether there was another one that got off, and I'm convinced that there's another one that got off because there's a crew right here that told me they were number 5 in line, and they were the ones, they were next off, and then that's when they scrubbed the mission, and they turned back and went back to the hard stand.
How did you actually get blown out of the plane or get out of the plane?
As far as I know, of course, things happen so quick. As far as I know, the bottom of the airplane in the waist, that was all torn off, and I went out with all this debris, or whatever you want to call it, parts of the airplane, out into the ice and the snow and the plowed field.
How did the rest of your crew survive?
They all survived. The only problem we had was the bombardier broke his arm right through the elbow, and I'm not sure what he hit or anything, but I've always thought he probably hit the right waist gun when he went out. Now that's speculation.
How soon afterward did you get to fly again?
We were taken to the hospital for observation, and as I remember it, they put us on light duty because the pilot injured his leg in getting out, and we were put on light duty, I think, for about a week, and then we were back flying again.
How did you feel getting back to flying status after that experience?
Felt a little bit nervous about all this. However, you had to push that aside. It was instructions to go fly. They needed the bombs over there, and we need to fight the enemy.
Did all the others get back into flying duty except for the one that was badly injured?
All went back in flying duty except the bombardier. And I heard later that he was sent home because they couldn't do anything with his elbow. It was a very bad break.
Tell me what the biggest challenge was for you during the war.
You mean the ones we bombed?
No, the biggest challenge. What was the most difficult thing for you to accomplish during your war years?
Most difficult thing to accomplish? I think it was to survive cadet training and then graduate. I think that was the most tough accomplishment we had.
Tell me what you learned about yourself during the war.
I learned that I was very naive, very protected, and grew up very fast. And I learned a lot of things about myself that I didn't know. And I think I became a much better person because those were the forming years, and that's what I see.
As you look back on your war experience, what one single memory stands out in your mind the most?
I think probably the one that stands out more than anything, of course, with the crash, but finishing the combat tour knowing that this is all behind you.
What have you been doing since the war in your career?
I was a transportation manager for 25 years with an electronic company, and I'm now retired since 1983.
Tell me what you've been doing recently with the 2nd Air Division Association.
I am the Deputy VP of the 491st Bomb Group. I was an interim VP from July until election last night.
Tell us briefly about your reunion in Shreveport, in Savannah.
In Savannah? Savannah was very interesting. I saw people there that I had seen before, and I met some new people. It was a very interesting reunion. There were a lot more than there were at any other 491st reunion. The first reunion I went to there were only a few, and as far as I know, there were over 100 at this reunion, and it was just wonderful. But seeing General Miller, which I hadn't seen since the war, I would have never have recognized him. He was there, and he's great people, and I think it's a great reunion, and I'm looking forward to the next 491st reunion, which we hope will be at Wright-Patterson when we dedicate the memorial.
Tell us what you want the world and history to remember about your contribution to the war effort.
Well, I think we'd like to have them remember us, that we fought, and especially remember those that gave their lives for freedom and to save democracy and preserve our way of life. I think that's what we need to pass on to the next generations.